During the late 1970s and early 80s, punk rock and new wave music exploded across the United States. The emergence of punk rock inspired the growth of independent music scenes in cities across the Midwest, including Bloomington, Indiana. That's where Chrissie Dickinson, Cynthia Hammond, Jenny Davis, and Emily Jackson bonded over their love for music from Patti Smith, The Clash, and X. In 1983, they formed Sally's Dream, a charismatic post-punk band that explored a wide terrain of musical styles, from pulsating garage punk to Americana roots rock. During the mid-1980s, Sally's Dream performed across Indiana and the Midwest. The band's music earned positive reviews from critics and a dedicated base of fans. But Sally's Dream never had a chance to release a full-length album. That changed last month with the release of Breaking Through, a 13-track anthology of the group's music. The release of Breaking Through was inspired by the 2022 death of the band's guitarist and songwriter, Chrissie Dickinson. I recently spoke with 3 members of Sally's Dream to learn more about the band's history. In just a moment, I'll be joined by Cynthia Hammond, Jenny Davis, and Emily Jackson of Sally's Dream. But first, let's hear a classic track from the band. This is Sally's Dream with On the Edge. I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. We just heard Sally's Dream with On the Edge. And I'm joined now by 3 members of Sally's Dream. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with our audience here in Indiana. If you don't mind, as we get started, would each of you introduce yourself in whatever terms you would like to?
My name is Emily Jackson. I was the drummer with Sally's Dream. I live in Bloomington, Indiana.
My name is Jenny Davis. I played keyboards, guitar, bass. I'd switch around depending on the song, and I live in New York City.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Hammond Jenkins, and I played bass and sang and played a little keyboard with Sally's Dream.
Yeah, thank you again. And congratulations on the release of your new CD, Breaking Through. It's an incredible compilation of your music. Sally's Dream was founded in Bloomington in 1983 and continued until 1989. And during the band's original incarnation, you released just a few tracks on compilation albums, including the Live from Bloomington series, which is where I first heard your music. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first full-length album the band ever issued, right?
It is?
Yeah, we were on a cassette compilation. Well, we released our own cassette with just a few songs on it back in
it was a serious music release, actually, but, we burned them ourselves, so,
So you were distributing the music at shows through cassette? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a bittersweet moment, as the release of the album was partially inspired by the death of the band's songwriter and guitarist, Chrissie Dickinson. How are you feeling at this moment, sharing this music and kind of processing her death? Just, give me a sense of how this album came about and kind of how you're all feeling at the moment.
Well, I can jump in. It's joyous. It's really incredible to be able to finally, after 35 plus years, put out this album that really came about when she passed in 2022. And we had always remained friends through the years. The girls of Sally's Dream would have reunions occasionally, play music, stay up all night, just like we did back in the old days. And when Chrissie passed, we had a celebration of her life at Emily's home in Bloomington, where lots of great friends from our past came. And Emily played a few songs she had burned on a CD. And it sounded really good to us after all those years. And we thought, oh, in honor of Chrissie, why don't we finally do it? Let's do it. And so we all went through our treasure troves of Sally's Dream memorabilias and cassette tapes that were stored in, boxes under beds and in closets. And we came together, and we've been working for the past 3 years, having reunions and plotting this out. And we're just delighted and happy. And I think she'd be happy too that we have our music finally out to the world.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
I am also very pleased that this is getting out there. I think it's a really good tribute to Chris. She was an amazing lyricist, and so many of these songs are still topical, unfortunately, how many decades later. It is very bittersweet. I wish she could be here to see how loved she is, but that's my 2 cents on it, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking about that question, and one thing that came to my mind was we came together in 2006 and did a show at Second Story in Bloomington. It was their 20-year anniversary. So we came together and remembered some of those old songs and wrote some new ones even. And that was really special. And to having done that means a lot to me with what has happened over the years.
I wanted to ask about the significance and legacy of Chrissie Dickinson. From what I know, she was born in Crown Point, Indiana in 1960. As you mentioned, she passed away in 2022 from heart failure. In addition to being a superb musician and songwriter, she was also a very prominent and highly respected music journalist. She wrote for the Chicago Reader, the St. Louis Dispatch, the Country Music Hall of Fame's Journal of Country Music. She was an incredibly talented person. Does anyone want to speak on Chrissie's legacy and music and, just her contributions to music?
Well, you gave a really nice outline there. She did some incredible work at the Journal of Country Music, really, groundbreaking journalism with with that background that she had a bit of, and just really digging into some really interesting stories. And she worked really hard. She was kind of that obsessive personality that really pays off when the results are just really, really stellar. And she was respected by the people that she worked with.
One thing that I'd like to say, I can't remember the time frame on this, but at some point she wrote an article about gays and lesbians in country music, and it was probably one of the first articles that was written about that subject matter. And being a lesbian myself, she called me before it was published to talk over some things with me. So she was also very thoughtful in those kind of ways where she really cared about other people's feelings. She felt things very deeply. And that was a really groundbreaking article, I think. So
it was. At that time, a lot of people would rather keep gays and lesbian country artists in the closet. And she found people and researched it for months and met some great folks and kind of pushed that through. She was an incredible writer and also a videographer, a songwriter that continued far after Sally's Dream. We miss her dearly.
I have so many questions for you all, but I do want to play as much music as I can. I'm going to share a track from Breaking Through now. This is Sally's Dream with Plaster Heart.
And when she cries, I cry into the night. And when she falls, I fall down to my knees. I'll pick up the pieces of her red plaster heart. And pick up the pieces of her red plaster heart.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. My guests are Emily Jackson, Cyn Hammond, and Jenny Davis of the band Sally's Dream. And we just heard Plaster Heart off a new compilation of their music titled Breaking Through. And as I mentioned, Sally's Dream was formed in Bloomington in 1983. I know the band went through a few incarnations prior to being known as Sally's Dream, including, I think, Altered Boys and Glass Factory, if that's correct. Tell us a bit about how the band came together. How did you all meet and kind of strike it off with each other?
Well, I met Chrissie at a Halloween party in 1980. It was my first year at Indiana University. And as it turns out, I was wearing her clothes. I dressed up as Twiggy, and a friend of ours had given me this mini dress to wear and these suede boots, and I had the whole 60s thing going. And then when I walked into the party to meet this woman that my friend was so excited for me to meet, Christy just took a drag off her cigarette and said, "Who are you? You're wearing my clothes." So that's how we met. But a few days later, she invited me over to her dorm room to listen to music, and she had a great collection and incredible taste. And all the other kids were out. It was a Sunday night, and they were out because the dorm cafeterias were closed. And we sat in her room with our friend Angie and just listened to Patti Smith's Horses and The Clash and Lena Lovitch and X and Robert Palmer and all this incredible music. And we sort of fell in love with it all and decided that night we were going to be in a band.
So Emily and I knew each other from college. We went to Hanover College, so we had already known each other. She was living in Bloomington. I moved to Bloomington and ended up living in a commune sort of situation with Emily. How I ended up in the band and meeting Cindy, I was directing a play that I cast Cyn in, and I don't remember the whole scenario there, but I think you guys had already started Glass Factory and sort of asked me to join you if I'm not mistaken.
You are not mistaken. We needed a bass player. But then there was some reforming, and so then we needed a new name. And our friend actually had a dream that she heard us on the radio driving in her car. And we were writing down everything we thought of in Sally's Dream. And we're like, oh, that sounds great. And now we can say that the dream came true.
Yay.
I want to ask you about the scene in Bloomington, but first, for listeners who may not know that much about the 80s scene in Bloomington, I just want to throw out a few influences that were percolating at the time to kind of set the scene. You came along at a moment in the early 1980s when the punk scene had really exploded in Bloomington. Bands like the Gizmos and MX80 had kind of created a new scene in the city. There was also an influence from mainstream rock and roll through the success of John Mellencamp and his recording studio, where REM came and recorded their album Life's Rich Pageant. At the same time, in Bloomington, there was also the National Women's Music Festival, which was happening annually and was bringing really significant artists from around the country and probably around the world to Bloomington. This was probably the most progressive music festival in the country at that time. It was really, I know you played too at the festival. Tell me about the scene in Bloomington at that time and how any of this was kind of influencing the direction of the group.
Bloomington was really amazing, vibrant scene, before cell phones, the internet, life was in the streets, and we all lived really cheaply and places that weren't even supposed to be lived in, that it was just genius. And there were places to practice and these good venues. Second Story was doing a lot of great booking, and also Jake's. And at that time, any touring bands would use a local opener. And so there were great opportunities there for us too. And there were a lot of other bands, and it was all very much helping each other out as well.
Well, I think it was such a close community of artists. We were all so young and throwing ourselves into it, not just musicians, but visual artists and all sorts of creative souls that lived in these studios around the town square, as Jenny or Emily mentioned, we weren't supposed to be there, but the landlords were happy to take our rent, which was like $110 a month. And we all became really close. It was a close-knit community. And we would pile into the clubs on the weekends and dance until dawn. And it was that punk new wave scene. It was just a really exciting time to be creating as a young person.
And Bloomington at the time also had the highest gay per capita population of anywhere in the country. So it really was like anything went. Everyone was very accepting. And there were like, we would play so often at Second Story that we would just make up other bands. We would play as other bands, like we'd all dress like guys, call ourselves the Bachelors or whatever, and learn a bunch of cover songs just to keep doing it. And people loved it. We would have other musicians sit in with us. It was an artistic free-for-all. It was amazing.
Yeah. I mentioned the National Women's Music Festival, which was inspired by the ideals of feminism and created an open space for all types of performers, lesbian musicians at a time when that was perhaps not accepted by the mainstream. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the 1980s was a time when women still had to fight for their place in the rock music scene. Did you feel that way? And can you talk a bit about your experience being women in this scene during the 1980s and what that was like?
It was absolutely a boys' club. There wasn't any other all-female band in town. We never met another all-female band until much later. And getting our feet on the ground, there was, laughter sometimes when we'd come into a club for a sound check. We certainly had a lot of interesting experiences on the road. But that said, audiences embraced us and we always made friends and fans. And we just wanted to play music and create our own music. And so, yeah, there was a little bit of breaking through there when people would first see us, like, can these chicks play?
We also got some guff from booking agents, like, oh, these photos are great, but like, where are the topless ones? Or we'd have guys yell wet t-shirt contest from the audience, like just really sexist crap.
I want to play another track off Breaking Through. And Sen, you mentioned the influence of groups like The Clash and X. I believe you co-wrote a song for Sally's Dream titled October 12th about the death of Sid Vicious, famous for his work with the band The Sex Pistols.
No, it was about the death of Nancy Spungen.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me, Emily. Yes. Well, it's about the death of the girlfriend of Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, Nancy Spungen. Anything you want to say about this track before we listen, and what inspired you to write about Nancy?
Well, it was an early track, and Nancy was murdered in the Chelsea Hotel in 1978, and Sid Vicious died months later of a drug overdose. And there was a lot of speculation about what had happened. I think it was a Rolling Stone article. It might have been another magazine. And Chris and I were reading a bunch of magazines at the time and kind of what happened to the Sex Pistols and what happened to this young woman. And we started cut and pasting this article together. It was one of our early songs. And so we just had fun kind of piecing it together and making it what we thought was poetic and kind of catching that sense of danger and, the sadness and also the grief that this young woman's life was taken.
Thank you for the correction, Emily. I appreciate it. This is Sally's Dream with October 12th, written about the death of Nancy Spungen.
Confrontation, blood on the mirror, flames in your hair. Who really did it? No one knows. No one seems to care.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. My guests are Emily Jackson, Cyn Hammond, and Jenny Davis of the band Sally's Dream. We just heard October 12th off a new compilation of their music titled Breaking Through. We've been discussing the band's origins in Bloomington, Indiana. Eventually, you left Bloomington for Boston. I believe it was around 1987. What prompted that move?
What's funny is you remember things differently. And I recall us talking about going to a bigger city, and like we didn't want to go out west or go to Chicago. And I had an opportunity for a graduate school program in Boston. And so was it my idea mainly, or was it floating in the air a lot? But that's what we did. We moved to Boston and took advantage of a lot of places to play that were really cool. We kind of made the rounds in the clubs there. And again, made a lot of friends.
I think also we were feeling a little bit overlooked in the Midwest, kind of lost in the cornfields. So when Emily was looking at schools and was getting her master's in Boston, we jumped on that because we had a couple friends in different bands, the Jetsons from Indianapolis and Amoebas and Chaos, that had moved out to Boston, and they loved it there. And it really was eye-opening because we had our circle of clubs in small Bloomington that we played, and we toured a lot through the Midwest and South, but to go to Boston where there were just dozens of clubs and dozens of hundreds of bands. So it was kind of a jump into a new territory for us. It was a really exciting time.
Sally's Dream was getting great press. You mentioned the bands you were playing with, Adrian Belew, the Smithereens, Fishbone, 10,000 Maniacs, Romeo Void, huge bands during that era and bands that continue to have a significance today. You wrote so much great music. You recorded so much great music. Were you searching for a record deal? Why are we just now hearing so much of this music? What was sort of the missing link there, the missing piece?
The missing piece was money. We got money, it was $3.35 minimum wage then. And I think we were mostly working minimum wage jobs with tips if we were lucky. We would save our money and do some recording, and then just didn't have enough money to press vinyl. That was the only option then, except for, cassettes. And we did search around for record labels. We reached out to Rhino. I think there were a couple of other record labels we reached out to, but there just wasn't interest at that time.
Yeah, we've got those wonderful rejection letters. We saved them.
That's awesome.
We also have a rejection letter from Alex Cox because we sent him October 12th because we heard he was making a movie about Sid and Nancy. So we have a lovely rejection letter. He said he'd listened to it and he liked it.
That's cool. I have some questions for you about the band's final days, but first I want to take a break and share another track from Breaking Through. This is Sally's Dream with Stop.
Cut my skin on a birthday pin, run my hands through my hair, smoking cigarettes. The clock says stop, 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 stop.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. We just heard Sally's Dream with Stop off a new compilation of their music titled Breaking Through. And my guests this week are members of Sally's Dream, Emily Jackson, Cyn Hammond, and Jenny Davis. And I'm curious about the band's split. I believe the band broke up in 1989. What happened? Do any of you want to comment on kind of why you all split apart?
I'll take this one because honestly, I was just having some emotional difficulties and I stepped out. Cyn is very nice about it. She's like, there were other things going on too that I didn't, because I was in such turmoil, I don't think I really noticed. But, life happens, which is what happened.
Yeah, I think also a lot of stuff was happening in all of our personal lives. Chrissie's sister, Julie, was diagnosed with a devastating brain tumor, and she was traveling from Boston to Galveston, Texas, and seeing her through all the radiation and chemo and surgeries and family stuff. And it was a really intense time for her. And when she came back, Jenny had moved to New York, and we regrouped and kind of morphed into a band we called the Virginia Dares. And that was Emily, Chrissie, and I, and a friend of ours who would play violin with us on occasion. And it was really good, more of an Americana bent. But we kind of lost that faith and that drive that we were going to break through and make it. And then Chrissie and I moved back to Chicago to be closer to our family. My mom wasn't doing great, and we wanted to be closer. And Emily stayed in Boston and played with some great bands there before she moved back to Bloomington. But we've all remained friends through all the stuff and all the years.
40 years after founding this group, you now have a full-length album documenting this amazing music. The album is titled Breaking Through, and you'll be hosting a release party at Gold Dust Vintage and Vinyl in Bloomington, Indiana on October 21st. Share any thoughts you have about the release party and kind of your hopes and expectations in putting this album out to the world, Breaking Through.
We've got some great reaction. There's a community radio station here, WFHB, and we're getting some really good airplay. They support local music very, very strongly, and that's nice. And just sharing it with our friends, and it's available on social media and Bandcamp, and getting feedback from people who remember us then and other people that just who knew me and didn't even know. They're like, wow, this is really fun, very impressive.
We're just so excited to come to Bloomington. I'm going to pick up Jenny from the airport, and I'm going to drive up to Bloomington with her, and we are going to have a party.
The music sounds so fresh and innovative. Is this attracting a newer generation to your music? Have you noticed that at all yet? I know it's just now kind of getting circulated.
I think so. I like to think so because, we weren't exactly, we didn't fit a genre exclusively. We just did the music that came from our hearts. And Cindy and Chris together were great songwriters, and they both sang. And so there was some variety in our presentation. And so what were we exactly? Kind of a power rock, sometimes a little bit of Americana flavor to it, but a little punkish sometimes, driving. So I think that I think it has a nice general appeal. And I think a lot of people are, I know some people are like, I don't like genres. I don't even like to speak in genres. So we're for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a diverse collection of sounds throughout the album. It's really impressive. And I can't thank you all enough for taking time to join me tonight to go through the band's history. Any final thoughts any of you would like to share on this album or your experience with Sally's Dream?
Well, the dream lives on, And I feel we're part of a great community of people who have made music, and maybe they're not making it anymore, but have stuff that they want to share with their friends and family. And we're a piece of history, kind of documenting that unique time, as we were talking before the internet, before it was easy to duplicate music and get it out there. And so we're taking advantage of the technology that exists now.
It's just a pleasure to be able to get this out there after all these years. I still love the music. Being able to do this project with Emily and Jenny over the last 3 years of going through all the music from rehearsal tapes to professional recordings, listening to it again has just brought a lot of joy.
Let's end with one more track from Sally's Dream. This is Go West. Thank you so much, everyone. It was really an honor to feature you and the music of Sally's Dream on the program. I can't thank you enough. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mama said, why don't you do the things you're supposed to do, like find a man
WFYI podcasts are brought to you by the Women's Fund of Central Indiana. Hosting author and podcast host Glennon Doyle at its annual Power of Women event on Thursday, November 6th. Tickets to hear from and meet Glennon are at womensfund.org.